Something that I really love about Dar al-Kalima University is that it's a very small community. It's very easy to make friends with everyone and make your own small family of small artists. Also, the college focuses on individual skills and collaborative works among students, so it's very fun in here.
The idea for Dar al-Kalima University was conceived here in Bethlehem, Palestine, responding to the need of our people. We had to assemble the right team. We had to build the infrastructure for it. We had to develop programs and to get them accreditation. And now is the first and only university in all of Palestine with a focus on art, culture, and design. We chose culture as the tool for social transformation. We will have all the artists, scriptwriters, actors, filmmakers, musicians, designers. They all will come out of this university and they will be able to transform the landscape of Palestine. People ask us why art? Art, culture, and design, they have to do with identity. And for us, it's really important to carve a dynamic Palestinian identity. At Dar al-Kalima University, you will meet incredible staff who help build this institution. And you will meet our students. 2/3 of them are women. This is a university that very much invests in women empowerment and in gender justice.
I believe that part of Dar al-Kalima University's success lies in the fact that it still maintains at its heart its community-based mission, its community-based initiatives that keeps it very close to what people need and want. And basically, the approach that we have used and continue to use as a university is this idea of witness, which is to always be engaged with the people responsibly to ensure always quality programs are delivered that meet their needs.
At Dar al-Kalima University, it is very important for us to connect to other universities, scholars worldwide, and so international conferences, music festivals, art festivals are very important component here of our work. We want people to meet here in Bethlehem. It was in Bethlehem that the divine met the human, and we want Bethlehem to become the place where people from all over the world can meet and interact and discover their common humanity. Dar al-Kalima University is a success story from Bethlehem. How we started 1995, very small, to become later a community college in 2006, and then 2013 a liberal arts college, and to become in 2021 a full-fledged university. This university was designed by Palestinian minds, was built by Palestinian hands, with the mission to educate the next generation of creative leaders in Palestine. Dar al-Kalima University is the city on the hill in the real sense of the word. And now this is a university that is a beacon of hope in Palestine. We will continue to make this university the address for art, culture, and design in the whole region.
Pastor Tassie Green. I am the interim associate pastor at First Pres Evanston, and I want to welcome each of you today. We've come from far and wide, and I want to welcome each of you. You honor us by your presence here. on behalf of the members of this church, the attenders, and just this whole area, we welcome you into this important discussion. Just a few items. If you need a bathroom, there are 2 in the back of the sanctuary. We're asking folks to stay in this area. You'll have a beautiful opportunity to hear from each of these folks, and there'll be a book signing at the end. And so on behalf of this congregation, we welcome you. I want to turn it over to Linda to do proper introductions, so thank you for being here, each of you.
Thank you, Tassie. 212 days of assault on the Palestinian people in Gaza. The images coming out of Gaza are ones of horror and terror. How can we, as people of faith, or people of no faith, or people trying to figure out what they believe in, to find common ground about humanity? What does solidarity look like? How do our spiritual beliefs and moral compasses fit with our country's pledge of with liberty and justice for all? That's why we're here today. A few additional housekeeping items. Each speaker will be given 15 minutes to address the topic of Gaza, religion, politics, and solidarity. This panel commits to a respectful presentation. They consider this sanctuary a safe space, respecting that we all have varying levels of knowledge and experience on this topic. You will be given an opportunity to ask questions to the presenters as a Q&A will be following. There are index cards either in the pew or walking up and down with volunteers. They will be collected at the end. Write your questions on those cards, and if directed to one specific presenter, please indicate. Otherwise, all presenters will have the opportunity to answer the questions posed. Without further ado, it is my privilege to begin this panel by introducing our first speaker, Reverend Dr. Mitri Raheb. Mitri Raheb is the founder and president of Dar al-Kalima University of Arts and Culture in Bethlehem. He's the co-founder of Bright Stars of Bethlehem, a US-based nonprofit. The most widely published Palestinian theologian to date, authoring or editing 50 books. He served as senior pastor of Christmas Lutheran Church from 1987 to 2017. He's the founding board member for the National Library of Palestine and a founding member and author of Kairos Palestine. He's received multiple international peace and humanitarian awards and has received wide international media attention. He's a social entrepreneur, a world changer, a peacemaker, and my friend. Mitri.
Thank you, Linda, and great to be with you all. Thank you for coming this afternoon. For me, it's really special to be in this sanctuary because we have had a long history of friendship and partnership with this church going back to the mid-1990s. And was glad to see Pastor David, with whom we started this partnership many years ago. And so I feel here at home, and this is why actually we wanted this event to be at this specific church. Our topic today that we would like to highlight is Gaza, religion, politics, and solidarity. And I'm honored to be sitting here with colleagues of mine, all of them good friends. And I think this image in itself is a message that we want to bring to the world. And I will say a bit more about that. I don't have a clicker, so I need always to tell our friends there, please, to the next. The question always is how to describe what's happening in Palestine today. You can see here, often I hear the word conflict, and people assume that it's a conflict between two people. But what we are experiencing, it's really not a conflict. And it is not a religious conflict, because some people would like to portray what's happening in Palestine as if it were a war between Jews on the one hand and Muslims on the others. That is also actually not really the reality on the ground. And in the media here, I hear all the time as if it were a war between Israel and Hamas. Again, that is misleading. And one word that is really, I hate, is the word complicated. Because when people want to avoid talking about the issue, or when people would like just, not to deal with the issue, then they say it's complicated. And I say it's really not complicated, it's crystal clear. Have you heard the word complicated when it comes to Ukraine? Ever? No, it's crystal clear, right? You have an occupation of a land and the US stand with the occupied. Except, and Palestine is always the exception, except when it comes to Palestine. The US is siding with the occupier. And in my latest book, which you can see out there, I came to describe the issue, like many other colleagues of mine, as a settler colonial project. This is what we have experiencing. Please, the next. And if you look at this map, and I'm sure many of you have seen this map, you can see how the Israeli settlements or colonies keep expanding, taking more land and pushing out more Palestinians from Palestine. And so it is as if Palestine is evaporating in this. This has been going for 100 years. It's not something that started on October 7th. It has been going since Balfour Declaration and even before that. And it's always about two issues, geography and demography. So Israel would like to take all the geography from the river to the sea and to kick out the demography, the Palestinian demography, in all different kinds of ways. And what's happening in Gaza is exactly this. It's all about geography and demography. In the current Israeli government, you can actually see how the religious and the political right in Israel are working hand in hand. This is actually, what I'm quoting here is, as you can see from Netanyahu's Twitter, this is the first paragraph of the agreement between Netanyahu's party and the other Jewish Israeli party. It says, "These are the basic lines of the national government headed by me. The Jewish people have an exclusive and unquestionable right to all the areas of the land of Israel." So it's only the Jewish people. So my family has been living there for centuries, if not millennia. I have no right to be there. This is what he's saying. And when he says the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, means historic Palestine. So Netanyahu doesn't really here make any distinction between the West Bank or Israel or Gaza. He's claiming the whole land being exclusively for the Jewish people. And he continues, the government will promote and develop settlement in all parts of the land of Israel, in the Galilee, the Negev, the Golan, Judea, and Samaria, Judea, meaning the Bethlehem region. And so we can see actually how Bethlehem today, the city where I live, the little town of Bethlehem, is becoming more and more and more smaller and smaller and smaller, because Israel has taken 86% of the land of Bethlehem for Jewish settlement or colonies. And we come to Gaza, and I'm sure you have seen the figures, but these are the figures from a few days ago. Almost over 35,000 people in Gaza have been murdered in airstrike. Over 77,000 injured. From those murdered, we have almost 15,000 children and 10,000 women. Around 180 women are giving birth every day in Gaza. There are 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza as we speak. And imagine being a pregnant woman in that situation for 7 months, being bombed on daily basis, day and night. There are no universities left in Gaza. There are 11 universities. All of them are totally destroyed. Why would you destroy a university? Why? And it would take 100 trucks, around 14 years, to clear the rubble in Gaza. Just to give you an idea, if we think of just rebuilding Gaza, how long that is going to take. So what is the aim of all of this? Actually, is to make life in Gaza unlivable, that people will have no chance whatsoever to survive. If you destroy 80% of the schools, all universities, all hospitals, all infrastructure, water, sewage, electricity, who can survive there? And so pushing the people of Gaza out, that was the original aim of this whole actual assault on Gaza. And the settler colonial idea actually is maintained by a hardware and by a software, by hard power and soft power. The hardware, all of these toys that Israel gets for free from the US, right? The F-35, the jets, all of these toys. These toys are used, the bombs are used in Gaza on a daily basis. But beside this hardware, the settler colonial project is sustained by the software. And the software here, the theology and the culture. It is this kind of Christian Zionism, not only the evangelical Christian Zionism, but also the liberal Christian Zionism, that actually sustain this settler colonial project in Palestine. And this new government actually, almost on a weekly basis, is attacking churches and church-related organizations. So you can see here how actually the attacks on churches have quadrupled last year compared with 2022. So this year is almost more. This is like in Jerusalem on Mount Zion when 2 Jewish settlers went in and destroyed the crosses actually of the Protestant missionaries who came to Palestine in the 19th century. Or here in the Armenian Quarter, where it says, death to the Arabs, death to Christians, death to Armenians, and death to Gentiles. You can see here again how religious language is used. Okay, the next one, please, they are telling me. Or here going into a church and destroying the crucifix, setting a church on fire. You have on the other side Hamas as a religious and political party, where for Hamas, religion is a tool of resistance. We can see in the next one, please, how actually churches are attacked and mosques in Gaza. Already Israel destroyed 223 mosques completely and 289 mosques partly in Gaza, in addition to 3 churches there. This is the church from the 5th century that was attacked in Gaza, the Greek Orthodox Church. This is the cultural center of the Greek Orthodox Church that was fully destroyed also in an airstrike in Gaza on October 30th. Israel has destroyed every university in the Gaza Strip, including our own university. This is our training center in Gaza before. Here you can see the activities that we have had. You have art exhibition, you have courses, programs for adults, students. We have 120 students there before October 7th. We were reaching out to thousands of kids through art program. All of this was actually totally destroyed. This is our university, was destroyed during Holy Week, just a month ago in Gaza. So this is how it looked like. Our staff were displaced. They are now in Rafah. You hear about Rafah a lot. So they are refugees, displaced people in Rafah, and 8 of them, and they told me we cannot just sit here, do nothing. We need to reach out to the displaced children in Rafah. And so this is what you see. One of our staff said, to the kids, let's go and collect all of this rubble and try to build homes, small homes with the kids, telling them, we have a commitment to rebuild Gaza. So Israel is destroying Gaza. Here, the Palestinian kids are working, thinking, envisioning how to rebuild Gaza. Again, religion as part of the problem, and especially not only lately, but throughout the last 60, 70 years, actually, since the Nakba and before, Israel has been using, and some religious groups in Israel, using actually the book of Joshua as the blueprint for settler colonialism. So you can see here on the right picture, Ben-Gurion, the founder of the State of Israel, having a Bible study at his home, 1958, on the book of Joshua, and he was thinking that he himself is Joshua. He is here coming into Palestine to take over the land and to get rid of the Canaanite. And the current minister in Israel says, what Ben-Gurion did not finish, we will finish now. And this is what we see also, what Netanyahu actually, and you can see how the Bible is being weaponized with genocidal intent. In the press conference on October 27th, Netanyahu referred to the Bible to declaring the invasion of the Israeli troops into Gaza. He said, this is quote from Netanyahu, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says our Bible. And if we go to that verse that Netanyahu is talking about, is 1 Samuel 15:3, where God is saying, "Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass." And this is exactly what's happening in Gaza. Now, again, you can see how the Bible is being weaponized against our people, and not only by Israel, but also by Christian Zionists, like in this country. I need to run a bit. Again, not only these crazy evangelicals that you think they are anxious about Armageddon, but even liberal Christian theologians, so-called post-Holocaust theologians, are actually also weaponizing the Bible against our own people. And the latest brand of Zionism is Islamic Zionism. I will not talk about it. Rami can cover that later. Next, please. So, if you go to Gaza today, at the beginning, the people were asking, God, where are you? And I spoke about that, wrote about that in one of my books. But actually today, in this genocide, people are not asking anymore, God, where are you? But God, where are your people? Where are the people of faith that allow actually this genocide to happen, to take place without actually challenging it? And God, where is humanity? This is the question that our people today in Gaza are asking. I have two more and then I'm done. So where are the people? I know many churches are actually supportive of Palestine, but too little. We see lots of solidarity on the street, and we see solidarity across religious affiliation. Here to the left, we have pastors for a free Palestine. We have Jewish Voices for Peace. And nobody talk about this kind of solidarity. Even now, what's happening at the universities, these people who are demonstrating for Palestine are not Palestinians necessarily. Few Palestinians, many Jewish people, many African American people. Nobody talk about this solidarity because they want just to demonize us. And for me, and this is the last I would like, hope is what we do. As people of faith, we are people of hope that analyze the situation, but we take action. We need to stand with those people who are oppressed, irrespective if they are Jewish or if they are Christian, if they are Muslims, because justice is actually for us what we look for. And so I think it is really high time for us to dismantle the settler colonial project. And it's very important to develop tools for liberation, because I showed you how scriptures can be weaponized for injustice, but scriptures has also the potential to offer solution, to offer solidarity. And I think today my hope is that through this panel, where you see people of different faith, of different religions, etc., they are sitting together, standing together for justice out of our faith convictions. We will not allow actually the name of God to be misused to do a Holocaust or like they did with the Jewish people, or to do genocide like they are doing now in Gaza. So with this image of solidarity across religions, solidarity for justice, not this interfaith dialogue where we exclude the main issue. Here we don't want to exclude the main issue, but to stand up for the main issue, for justice, for freedom, until all of us are free, for an inclusive society, an inclusive country, and where every person can live in dignity. And I think this is our message tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitri. It's my hope that you all walk away from here realizing that it is not a conflict and it is not complicated. Our next speaker today is Rabbi Brant Rosen. He is the founding rabbi of the Congregation Tzedek Chicago and the co-founder of the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council. He's fought for peace across the U.S. and the world. In fact, he recently returned from the Erez crossing on the Gaza border just this past week, where he stood in solidarity with rabbis for ceasefire in an attempt to bring food relief to the people of Gaza. Rabbi Rosen.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. And thank you all for being here. Special thanks to First Presbyterian and to Bright Stars of Bethlehem for hosting this program. I'm so honored to be part of this panel, and particularly with my dear friend Mitri. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to have this conversation. So I want to pick up on one of the threads that Mitri left us with, and that is the issue of solidarity, because I think one of the things that we are seeing in this movement of solidarity with Palestinians against the genocide in Gaza is a remarkable level of Jewish participation. Jewish Voice for Peace, which is an organization that I'm very, very involved in, and other organizations like If Not Now, have been mobilizing together with Palestinian partners and other allies on the ground almost from the beginning. And we've seen this presence. And I know personally, because of the work that I do, my congregation, Tzedek Chicago, is an avowedly anti-Zionist congregation. And I meet on a regular basis, particularly young Jews, not only, but particularly young Jews who have felt alienated from Jewish life because of the insistence of Jewish communal gatekeepers on putting Israel and Zionism at the center. And these are people who have a deep Jewish identity and a deep Jewish yearning, and understand that their sense of solidarity with oppressed peoples of all kinds, but including Palestinians, comes from a place of human conscience, but also deep Jewish conscience, and the Jewish values that they were taught in their families and in their religious schools. I meet them all the time. They send me emails all the time. I was just yesterday at DePaul. I was asked by Jews for Justice at DePaul, who have been part of the encampment there, very, very solid presence there. And they invited me and the cantor from my congregation to lead a Havdalah service, which is the Jewish service that ends the Sabbath, that ends Shabbat. And we did that, and there was a very visible presence of Jews among the crowd, hundreds and hundreds of people in this very amazing, peaceful display of solidarity. And afterwards, you may remember that there was a huge thunderstorm last night. Afterwards, the clouds were starting to gather, but I couldn't get away because so many young Jewish people came up to me and thanked us for doing this. More than one person said, we haven't done anything Jewish in a long, long time because we felt so alienated, and this is the first time I felt that I could display my Jewish identity publicly, and not only to be Jewish, but to do Jewish. And they were doing it right there at the DePaul encampment, at a place where so many leaders, so-called leaders, are saying that anti-Semitism is being expressed. I mean, one of the things I said last night was, I just want to tell you as a Jewish person, I feel perfectly safe here. And that probably got the biggest cheer of the evening, but it was true. It came from my heart. So I just want to let you know that the Jewish community is a very diverse place, like all communities. Yes, there are those who stand by Israel and support Israel and what Israel is doing. There are those who are deeply confused and are remaining silent and sitting on the fence because they're in great confusion and pain. But there is a surge of folks throughout North America, and I would imagine throughout the world, who out of their Jewish conscience are rising up in solidarity in this moment, out of a place of deep Jewish conviction and conscience. I know this because of the work I do every day. I want to address the issue of anti-Semitism because I think it is a weapon that is being wielded in a very cynical and destructive way toward those who are standing with Palestinians and showing solidarity with Palestinians. It's very, very important, if there's anything you take away from my comments today, it is that Judaism and Zionism are two separate things. Much as there are those Jews who would like the world to conflate them and see them as irrevocably connected, Judaism is a centuries-old spiritual peoplehood that arose largely in the diaspora as we know it. Zionism is a political movement that started in the 19th century. It is not uniquely Jewish, as Mitri just pointed out, and it is in many ways a radical overturning of what it had meant to be Jewish up until that point. Zionism sought to create a Jewish majority nation state in historic Palestine. The idea of creating a sovereign Jewish state in that land for centuries was prohibited by Jewish tradition. The rabbis saw this as an anathema, that the third Jewish commonwealth, so-called, could only be established when the Messiah came. But in the meantime, we seek to repair the world in whatever communities we happen to live in. The land was very important, and it has always been very important in Jewish tradition. It's a mitzvah or a commandment to make pilgrimage there. So many of our holidays and our observances are connected to the land in many ways, and certainly through our connection to the Torah and the Hebrew Bible, there is a strong sense of grounding in the land. But the land for Jews for centuries was a spiritual concept, was a spiritual ideal. The idea of treating it in a concrete way as some kind of political solution was a radical overturning of what it meant to be Jewish up until that point. So when people say anti-Zionists are anti-Semites, that is an incorrect and often very disingenuous argument. And I can attest that there is a new generation of very proud Jews who define themselves as anti-Zionist, who, believe me, have a deep sense of Jewish identity and desire for Jewish safety and security, but understand that Jewish safety and security cannot be inseparable from the safety and security of all peoples. And that is the one thing about the establishment of the State of Israel. That is the one thing about the establishment of the State of Israel that we need to bear in mind. Israel was established in 1948, although the Zionist movement advocating for a Jewish, as Mitri said, a settler colonial movement that advocated for a Jewish nation state in Palestine for a good 100 years before that. After the Holocaust, after the horrors of the Holocaust, there were Jewish refugees seeking a home. And it is to the world's shame that they were not allowed back to their homes or to other countries around the world. And the world should bear that shame. However, the solution to this issue was not to go into a land and dispossess another people, create a state on their backs, and thereby create what is today the largest refugee population in the world. That was an essential injustice, the Nakba, as the Palestinians refer to it, that has been ongoing ever since and has been at the root of this issue, this not a conflict that Mitri described. It didn't begin on October 7th. It didn't begin with the blockade of Gaza in 2006. It began with the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Palestinians from their homes, Israel's refusal to allow them to return, and establishing a settler colonial state based on the identity of one particular group of people, and either turning Palestinians into refugees, into second-class citizens in 1948 Israel, or into people under military occupation in the West Bank after 1967. So if there's anything that we can carry forward from this, it's the notion that safety and security should not be zero-sum. It should not occur at the expense of another people. The only way we are going to find our way forward is to understand that solidarity is a very sacred value, And I see solidarity not only as a political tactic, but as a religious value, as a Jew, and as a person of conscience. You know, we just finished the holiday of Passover in the Jewish community, and the action at the Gaza border that Linda was referring to was a Passover action that was using the sacred imperative of the Passover Seder, the signature moment of the Passover Seder, all who are hungry come and eat. And together with our fellow rabbis from Rabbis for Ceasefire, we really agreed that we couldn't say these words around the Seder table without acknowledging that a state in the name of Jews everywhere is starving another population as a weapon of war in an ongoing genocide. And so that we needed to go there and say these words there. That was the only way that we could make Passover truly honest and meaningful. And so that was, at the heart of what we were doing. We were using understanding our own Jewish tradition as a sacred tool of empathy and solidarity with the Palestinian people. It was one of the most remarkable Passovers I think I've ever experienced. There were many Jews in the Jewish community, and maybe some Jewish people here can attest to this, who were thinking when Passover came around, I'm not sure how I'm going to celebrate this holiday this year. There are a lot of us saying we're not quite sure how to be Jewish, in such circumstances. And I think the answer, as ever, has always been through solidarity. That is ultimately going to be the way forward, not just for the Jewish community, but for all of us. That safety, security, and creating the kind of world that we want to see, what we call in Judaism, olam haba, the world to come, needs to make room for all. It has to be all of us or none. So thank you all for your presence here. I take by your presence here that you share this vision and these values, and it's an honor to be part of this community of solidarity as we go forward.
Thank you, Brant, and thank you for helping this group understand that this did not begin October 7th. This is a history. Our next speaker is Dr. Rami Nashashibi. He is a MacArthur Fellow, a Doctor of Sociology from the University of Chicago, and the founder and executive director of the Inner City Muslim Action Network, a nonprofit organization incorporated in 1997 on Chicago's South Side and also in Atlanta's West End. He commits to building bridges across racial, religious, and socioeconomic divides. He sits on the board of the Margaret Casey Foundation. He's lectured across the world on topics related to American Muslim identity and social justice issues. Most recently, Rami took a delegation to Palestine. I had the privilege of hearing his profound words on the Mount of Olives. Rami, welcome.
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings be upon each and every one of you. Let me begin by thanking the leadership in this church and the members of this church by having the moral clarity and courage to host this conversation here. Can we give it up for the church here? Secondly, I want to thank our dear beloved Father Mitri for convening this conversation with us. It is, I cannot say enough about the purpose of also supporting Dar al-Kalima and Bright Stars and his institution. It is, without really any exaggeration, one of the most dynamic, thriving universities, even in this country, devoted to arts and culture and cultural expression that I have ever seen, let alone to see this in Bethlehem and to now have to witness images of the rubble of this university, this project, committed to what? Cultural expression, dynamism, telling our stories. What reason on earth could there be to decimate an institution like this in Gaza other than just brutal, raw terror? And so please, I want to acknowledge, if you go to this university, you see Muslims, Christians, kids of all that are thriving in film and arts and culture and dance and music. It is extraordinary. Our delegation, Black Jerusalem, of which I have Dr. Crystal Truscott, who was on that, and I believe I see Sister Sydney Wallace, also from one of the oldest Jewish African-American congregations in the country, that's here with us tonight. It was part of this multi-faith delegation called Black Jerusalem that were here. I also see my mother. I always have to shout her out, or I get in trouble. That's here. My mother was born in May of 1948. She was literally born in the thick of a Nakba, fleeing an ancient village called Ain Karam, which is, some of you may know, where her father, who's still alive, my grandfather, can tell us stories of, 96. And my mother was in flight. So she has witnessed, she was born during a Nakba and now witnessing and protesting another Nakba in front of her face. One thing you may not know about this village, it is now really a town outside of Jerusalem. It sits underneath Yad Vashem, and the painful irony of a institution that we visited, that of course, to commemorate the horrific horror and to encounter the horror of the Holocaust, which we should all be familiar with. We should all commit our lives to making sure anything like that never happens again to any people. Yet the Palestinians have to then bear the brunt in so many ways of that legacy, including having the very institution built on top of stolen land from Ain Karam, my grandfather's land, which in 1946, my grandfather will tell you this today, the Palestinians there, Christian and Muslim, by the way, that is the town of the birthplace of John the Baptist, right? A sacred place with some of the most sacred religious tourism outside of the old city of Jerusalem happening in around Jerusalem. Then in 1946, the Palestinians in Ain Karam gladly, willingly, and beautifully hosted refugees, Jewish refugees seeking asylum from the Holocaust, Polish refugees, over maybe 250 of them. And this is documented. My grandfather will talk to you about how they fed each other, took care of each other, and they welcomed their presence. So this, among many myths, that the Palestinians not only were incapable of identifying and empathizing with Jewish suffering, but the Palestinians themselves is a community that was composed of Jewish identity. On my father's side, I have Jewish cousins. This may sound weird, but for early 20th century Palestinians, it is not uncommon. Palestinians intermarried, Christian, Jewish, Muslims. This idea that somehow it was like this myth of a conflict between Jews and Muslims is absolutely asinine. And anyone with any sense of historical veracity will tell you one of the most famous memoirists of the early 20th century, Palestinian memoirists, is a man by the name of Wasif Jawhariya. He was a Greek Orthodox Christian, memorized Quran, was the famous oud player. He'll talk about going to, Orthodox fasting with his friends during Ramadan. He had memorized the entire Quran. He would go to his friends with Ramadan. Then they would go to Purim. Then they would go to Easter things. And then they would go party at night at the Nashashibi residence. That was early 20th century Palestinian life, right? That was very common. This is not a myth. And I must speak to myths, and we must, as communities of faith, we have a tradition, kula qawla sadida, say a word that is truthful and straightforward, speak it plain, as Malcolm used to say. And I want to acknowledge, speaking of Malcolm, our great Dr. Carruthers, who in the spirit of Black liberation and a Evanstonian that was here fighting for the principles of Black liberation and basic human dignity. Can we give it up for Dr. Carruthers? I'm honored to speak with him. And beyond humbled and honored to be with this extraordinary human being, that I was shouting out last week at Northwestern during the encampment, during Passover, while this man was actually leading that delegation that he spoke of. So I just want to publicly acknowledge how humbled I am to be here with you. But I want to speak it plain. We have to speak it plain. As spiritual folks, let's speak it truthfully. Let's not be among those that, as the Quranic verse, تَلْبَسُوا الْحَقِّ بِالْبَاطِلِ, that we dress truth with falsehood in the name of this kind of just despicable, insidious concept of complexity. Look, a lot of us are academics. We can sit with complexity all day long, right? As long as we don't use that as a way to duck and dodge uncomplicated truths. The uncomplicated truths. You know, there are people that would hear what our beloved Reverend opened up with about this colonial state, the colonial settler project, and now they're trying to criminalize that discourse. You know they're trying to criminalize that. That somehow that is anti-Semitic, to suggest that Israel is a settler colonial project. Again, is there any sentient being left in these conversations that has any sense of history, right? I mean, I want someone that can make t-shirts out here. I want a t-shirt. Here's a t-shirt idea. You're going to make thousands out, especially in this month, maybe even more than that. I want the t-shirt to say, Zionism is a colonizing adventure, quote unquote. Listen to this and go make thousands and then write some checks to Iman and other nonprofits. Zionism, put black and white t-shirt. Zionism is a colonizing adventure. And I want you to wear this into the halls of Congress, into the president's office of your universities. And then I want on the back, I want you know who said that? Jabotinsky, a Ukrainian Jewish refugee who goes on to be one of the most important ideologues in the Zionist thoughts. But he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. In 1899, when Kipling was writing his beautiful White Man's Burden, again, any historian would just say of course it was a colonizing project because everyone was talking about colonial narratives at that time. When Kipling was writing that in 1899 in the New York Times, Conference of Zionists elect delegates at their meeting in Baltimore will colonize Palestine. This is the New York Times. And they delegated Rabbi Goldhill and Wise were chosen as members to go attend. They weren't hiding this. Colonization. Golden Meir, who President Biden likes to talk about meeting, who I had a chance to directly confront the president on, talks about what? Palestine. A land without what? A land without what? People. For a people without a land. That is the sick, demented, colonizing narrative that was used, of course, across, not only to take lands from Palestine, but lands across Africa, Asia. It was the colonizing narrative. And among other facts, uncomplicated facts, were that the early Zionist conference and Zionist thinkers were thinking about other places aside from Palestine. In fact, they were thinking about even other places that were under colonial rule of the British to possibly settle. Uganda was a very serious consideration. Am I making that up? This is real. Ask any historian. And in fact, do you know many of the Zionist conference leaders at the time thought, okay, Uganda, let's try Uganda. You know who refused Uganda as a possibility? This is a beauty right here. Were the other colonists from Britain that said, no, we already got this. We already got this, bro. Go find somewhere else to colonize. We've already colonized this joint. What am I getting at? I am trying to get at that I also, part of taking faith seriously in this moment, and I take faith seriously among all of our traditions, is calling out, but calling up. Calling in and calling up. Calling up to some of the most profound ideals in our and principles in our traditions, and I believe those principles still exist in all of our traditions. And I believe they've animated the greatest liberation movements of our times, and going back to the times of the prophets, of the great prophets. And part of that is acknowledging that, as Rabbi was speaking, is that Palestinians do not have a problem connecting with and celebrating Jewish ancestral connection to the land. There is nothing about that notion that is untrue to us. The Quran, if you don't know this, the Quran mentions the Prophet Muhammad around a handful of times. Peace and blessings be upon him. Moses is mentioned in the Quran over 125 times. The stories of Bani Israel, the children of Israel, are as much our stories as they are anyone else's stories. And so while we can respect religious traditions, religious exclusivism that says you can only talk about Jesus, coming to a white evangelical from the middle of Alabama telling me I could only, if I know about Jesus and if I've accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, when I have a grandfather that comes from the village of John the Baptist, is asinine. Like, you're talking to Palestinians about knowing Jesus and accepting him. We know about Jesus. We love Jesus. We love Mary. I love Moses. We love these stories. And in these stories, in these abilities, but we have to call out. We have to call out. Because this is not about, it's about a certain type of toxic trifecta that has animated the conquest of this land and all other lands that we have to call out. And what is that trifecta made out of? It's made out of, number one, if we want to speak honestly about it, it was the eugenicist projects of the early turn of the century, right? That this idea that there's an evolved race and that race deserves to colonize and conquer and control and civilize the savages. When they passed the $24 billion recently, it was Netanyahu not only thanking the Congress and apologists for the Israel in this country, they were saying this is good for Western civilization. That was their language. They're still using that language, that Israel will be a sea of civility in a island of civility in a sea of barbarity. That was the trope of the eugenicists that were colonizing, this idea that there's an evolved race. Second is theology. They have always deployed theology. They deployed it here. The manifest destiny was used and perverted verses from the curse of Ham to subjugate and kill and rape, mass rape. Do we talk about really what truly has ever happened on this land? We had a moment of, what do they call it? A racial reckoning. We barely, and we thank in Evanston for serious conversations about reparations, but those are barely happening. But it's the sick, perverted dementation of religious texts. And it's happening now, this idea that we can only exclusively claim the stories of Moses. And now all of this is ours. Forget that Jabotinsky came from the Ukraine. Forget that your families have been here for hundreds of years. Now it's all ours. Every inch of it. And we could do anything we want to anyone on there. We can put you in our military courts. We can rape your children, which they do in their prisons that nobody's talked about. We can completely steal every inch of your land. We can uproot your olive trees. The same trees that, again, the rabbi spoke, that when I hear the father talk about the deafening silence of the Christian church in America that says you love Jesus, said these trees that were around during the times of Jesus, these Christians community, they bombed the fourth oldest church in the world, decimated it, no Hamas infrastructure, nothing. And there was not a word of condemnation from a vast majority of Christians in this country. Why? Because that's not the words of Jesus. That's not the Christianity of Jesus you're tapping into. It's the Christianity of the white supremacist slave master religion that people like James Cone and others have tried to help America disentangle yourself from for now decades. And we're never going to be free until we do that. And lastly, of that toxic trifecta is the economic piece. Let us not ever lose sight of what type of economic exploitation is happening. Certainly on this lands, when people were in bondage, were actually used as assets in actually producing the type of extraordinary wealth, billions of dollars stolen extracted from black families in things like redlining and restricted covenant on the South Side. And when we talk about the economic exploitation of Palestinians in this moment, when we talk about some of the largest oil reserves outside of the Mediterranean, don't think that does not factor into the analysis that we're talking about today. So it is that toxic trifecta that we have to be up against. And in the last minute, because I do believe that spirituality and faith traditions, like the father alluded to, are not some feel-good. I know there are critics. I know there are cynics. They sometimes call it interfaiths, right? When they're talking about interfaith. I've heard that critique, but I'm among the people that take faith seriously. And I think many of you are. And I'm talking about the Bonhoeffer faith. the Bonhoeffer faith that called out cheap grace, right? Was asking for, a repentance without soliciting forgiveness. Let us be the people that acknowledge what Malcolm talked about, the 6-inch blade in my back, and that we don't begin to recover from that by when you just pull it out 3 inches. I still got 3 inches of a blade in my back. Pull that damn knife out my back, and then let's start talking about healing. Let's think about both the Jewish and Muslim concept of tshuva in Hebrew literally means the same thing, to turn back to God. Repentance is a turning away from. One of the most powerful things I witnessed, and I was a cynic of it initially because I have a dear Catholic friend on the South Side, Father Flager, who invited me, rebel rouser, right? But invited me once to be part of the tradition of washing the feet. He said, Rami, I want you on stage with me when I wash the feet. I said, Father, you ain't washing my feet. I said, I love you, my man, but you ain't washing my feet. I'll be on stage with you. I'll give you the talk. But he invited then returning residents, and he invited immigrants and refugees, and I was on stage, and I was not prepared, quite frankly, for how powerful that ceremony was and how it affected me. And you know why? Because I saw what the congregants could not see. I saw this white man on his knees washing the feet of returning residents and looking up at them and asking for forgiveness that we have failed you. Asking forgiveness from immigrants that we have failed you. And it emotionally hit me, and I wondered, and I contemplated afterwards why. Why did that hit me so hard? And what I realized is, we don't see public acts of forgiveness often. We don't see public solicitations of forgiveness. And I believe the pathway forward for Jews, Muslims, Christians, and people of faith is we all need to continue to connect to that land. Jerusalem is an international global city. I believe in that. It's as Palestinian as it is anything else. It is global. It's a city, it's an ancient city that my father's family goes way back to. But it's a city of all of our faiths. And if we're going to connect and continue to have this faith connection to this land and see our people thrive, we need to publicly acknowledge the harm. What I pray and hope is that among and we've all contributed, we're all complicit in the harm that's happened in Palestine and Israel. I hope our faith communities can lead a genuine faith movement that we're seeing on these campuses, where students are performing Maghrib, evening prayer, on the same mats that they're doing the Shabbat prayers on. And it's happening across this country, and no one is acknowledging how powerful and authentic expression of religious solidarity is happening right now. My prayer is that illustration of religious solidarity, the type that our beloved rabbi has led, that is not just a political, ideological expression of any kind, but that is the best of our human tradition that we all get to celebrate. And with that, I believe there's freedom for us all.
Wow. Rami, you speak truth to power. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Dr. Iva Carruthers. She is the General Secretary of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, an interdenominational organization within the African American faith tradition, focused on justice and equity issues. Former director of the Black Theology Project, Dr. Carruthers has a long history of teaching, engagement, community development initiatives, and social ministry, fostering interdenominational and interfaith dialogue. Dr. Carruthers is a frequent speaker before national and international forums. She has served as a consultant and delegate to many organizations in the public and private sectors. My friend Iva, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to certainly fast forward so that we can have some engagement with the audience. What a powerful, phenomenal panel. Voices that we have already heard. As I listened, I kept changing how I wanted to come with and to you. And you said something about calling it up and calling it out. I want to suggest that we need to call it in. And the in is the sacred memory of what we must go back to, that concept of Amani, on the way back to the divine. What we must go back to in order to make the right decision at the crossroads. And what I want to submit is that we are at a crossroads. And Evanston in particular has a special role to play at the crossroads. So if you will just allow me to share my journey over the last 3 weeks in an effort to decide how I could uniquely speak in this forum. 3 weeks ago, I was speaking at the United Nations in Geneva before the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. It represents the affirmation and the proofing up over decades that slavery was a crime against humanity. And for that, there has to be a reckoning and a process of reparations and reparatory justice at the end of the day. And that the consequences, like the causes, were global and are global. And so one of the things that I want to share with you is the journey of connecting the dots. What I can say that I am uniquely positioned to be, to feel, to represent here is what it means to be mother. The woman in me allows me to share with you the lamentation and the holy rage of this moment in the world. And so my question is, what do you do with that holy rage? What must we do with that holy rage? So one of the things I did was I got here about 15 minutes earlier just so I could go and drive by my family home. I grew up in Evanston at the tail end of the Jim Crow Northern style, separate but equal. I witnessed as a student at Northwestern, Evanston get on the global map, the US map, as having been the epicenter of a vision for a better world through, quote, integrated education. And I saw the failure of that. The failure of that because it was construed from the beginning to be a project only for people of African descent. At the crossroads, we failed. And what I want to suggest is that perhaps in a moment when Evanston has a second chance, because all over the world, Evanston is known as the first municipality to dare to have the courage to declare reparations for people of African descent, perhaps we won't make that same mistake again. But we will make that same mistake if we don't accept the call to solidarity. And we have to understand that we are a remnant here that can be an epicenter for a global ripple effect to embrace the call of what Martin Luther King called a revolution of values. And what does that revolution of values mean? It means we must give up the privilege of thinking of ourselves as a chosen people or as exceptional. We must give up the notion that it's okay to create a hierarchy of human value that 40 years ago said for every one Israeli life, we're going to take 3. When you look at the data now, it's for every one Israeli life, we're going to take more than 30,000. our hands and see the blood on them. In the name of this country, in the name of our tax dollars, and in the name of our identity. And dare we have the courage to say and to do, not under our watch. So it's not enough to say, what does justice look like? I think the question the panel has begun for us to think about is, what does solidarity look like? My first trip to the Middle East, quote, one of the myths, it's not the Middle East, it's Northeast Africa. We need to understand what's going on right now in Africa is connected to what's going on in Palestine. We need to understand that it was not just the ambassador a few weeks ago who represented the United States casting a veto vote. But remember, call into the sacred memory and understand that Andy Young was fired as ambassador for a conversation he had with the Palestinians. Let us remember that it was the young people in Gaza who told the young people in Ferguson as we were walking with them, this is how you protect yourself from the tear gas. Because the same Israel who trained police in the United States is the same Israel who was the front door to Africa and the upholding of the apartheid system in South Africa. We have got to connect the historical dots and make sense out of this moment as a moment that if we fail, we are going to fail at a time where there is no turning back. And I say that because the civil rights movement is a clear model for the campus encampments, as they should be, but they are not sufficient. And what I want us to consider is the changing landscape. And I submit to you that that changing landscape includes a reality of simulacra and fake news in which the real is now fake and the fake is real. And we do not have the discerning power to figure out the difference. I want to submit to you that the reality is we now have a genomics and genetic platform around which new technologies are allowing for the weaponization in ways that we cannot even imagine. The question is, in whose hands will that technology be? AIPAC has said they have experimented with weather control as a possibility for weaponizing what happens in the Middle East. So I get asked very often by people of African descent, so what matters of Palestine should that have for me? We got our own stuff to deal with. That answer has to be, if we do not begin to focus on the solidarity of the movement, we will be all gobbled up by a divide and conquer strategy. A divide and conquer strategy in which more billionaires were made during the pandemic, and those with wealth continue to create the kind of wealth that allows them now to supersede nation states. So it's time for us to raise a different set of questions, to envision a different world, but it can't be at the level of mere conversation and theologizing. I am proud to say that in my Presbyterian family, that McCormick Theological Seminary has established the first Center for Reparatory Justice Transformation and Remediation in the country. And they've asked me to serve as its founding executive director. That has power for making theology a lived experience. But if we don't connect the dots, and as our dear brother Mitri has said, and understand that this panel in itself is an act of resistance, if we don't figure out how to continue this conversation after today, if we don't embrace the vision of Bright Stars of Bethlehem after today, then this has just been a wonderful Sunday afternoon. But the real work is ahead. And so what I would hope that each of us are able to ask ourselves, why are we really here? And what are we really willing to do to demonstrate solidarity? I don't care how you cut it. If 50+% of this nation can go to bed and wake up in the morning and justify support for the kind of political dehumanizing statements and agenda that is coming out of the mouths of a former president and not have conflict with that, that's problematic. It is problematic at the level that a democracy is not only at stake, but our very basic humanity is at stake. So one of my mentors and ancestors, Margaret Burroughs, is speaking to me now because she wrote that classical poem, "What Shall I Tell My Children Who Are Black?" And I want to leave us with that question. What shall we tell our children who are American about what we did as we witnessed what we have witnessed that is going on right now in Gaza and in Palestine? The umbilical cord goes from here to there for us. And we cannot unsee what we have seen. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And so I would hope that we can stay hoped up enough that we have the courage to make sure that the agenda that is 900+ pages outlined in a report I commend you to get and begin to read called Project 2025, that you familiarize yourself with understanding what the agenda is, not just for the United States, but for the rest of the world, and that includes each of us. I thank you for this opportunity to share from our heart what we need to be about, because we got to figure out what solidarity looks like and how we're going to participate in the building of it.
Thank you, Iva. I think I speak for each person in this room when I express true gratitude to the four of you for speaking truth to power, committing to a pro-humanity, and to drive us to action and hope. Thank you. Give it up one more time for these guys, please. Okay, now on to the Q&A, the fun part. So I'll ask a round of questions right now, and whoever feels prepared or a desire to answer, please step up. So the first round of questions from our guests today. What's the vision for the future of Palestine? What changes need to happen? How can we as Americans advocate for change? What do you think the role of the religious leadership should be in supporting local ceasefire campaigns and protests? And lastly, in what ways do you all see Zionism and white supremacy connected? I'll read them one more time just so that our speakers can think a little bit. What is the vision for the future of Palestine? How can we best advocate for that change? What do you see as the role of the religious leadership in America? In what ways do you all see Zionism and white supremacy connected? Thank you. Thank you, Rami.
I mentioned that in the Black Jerusalem delegation trip that we took recently, and some of you know our last day was October 7th there, so it was this extraordinary piece and journey. Rabbi Andrea London was with us here from Evanston, and I don't know if she's here tonight. I don't think she is. But it's been a journey. It's been a journey. Among the most hopeful moments, I love the idea of being hyped up and hoped up. This notion of where hope, how do we still find hope? One of the most hopeful moments came in a conversation in Ein Kadam after visiting Yad Vashem with a Palestinian scholar by the name of Bashir Bashir. He had written a book with an Israeli historian named Amos Goldberg called, I think the title is The Nekba and the Holocaust, A New Grammar of Trauma and Suffering, something like that, Routledge Press, major book. And why I found that conversation so hopeful and inspiring is for me, that is the vision, that, or at least a good portion of the vision, that there were people, Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Muslims, Christians, who envisioned this idea of acknowledging the horrors and interconnected realities. The book in no way, shape, or form attempted to be a comparison between a Holocaust and a Nekba, but was talking about the historical interconnections, the points of connectivity, the trauma, the idea of a hurt people hurting people, the idea of inflicting what some of the same patterns of harm upon the Palestinians, and what it means to heal from that. I think the idea that Bashir Bashir spoke so brilliantly about when asked, and I think it was by someone like, I think Rabbi London, asked him this question specifically about where do Jews go then in your vision of repair? And as a Palestinian living, he said they stay right here. And who he's speaking to is like, he understood that there are many now that have been part of generations of migration that are part and parcel of the experience in Palestine, Israel. Palestinians are not talking about the expulsion of Jewish people from historic Palestine when they're talking about freedom and liberation. They're talking about reconciliation, they're talking about justice, but at the same time, I think anyone would look at the arrangement and say that any American Jewish person that is anywhere in the world can have more access to land and privilege than Palestinians that live there for hundreds of years is just patently unfair and unwrong and incompatible with any notion of justice. So part of confronting this vision, confronting the truth, is about laying out a vision of reconciliation that means speaking to the injustice and means confronting something immediately here. I also think that the question about Zionism and white supremacy is it's in and of itself is a conference. But I will say this, because, and I would love the rabbi's perspective on this. I know I've talked to many beautiful Jewish folks who are part of the spectrum of the diverse Jewish theological and political spectrum you talk to, that would talk about themselves as Zionists, not of the Jabotinsky ilk, that see in Zionism still a genuine longing, connection, and realization of Jews to be part of the land. And I think of those folks not unlike people that still, progressives and liberals, that sometimes hold out a vision of America, that quaint mid-20th century Americana moment, that Mad Men America moment that sometimes people get nostalgic for, without recognizing that part of the reconciliation that is so powerful that you said is at the heart of your project, is acknowledging the horror and the harm that is part and parcel of so much of the daily fabric of our life in America. And I think part of this conversation about the future of Israel begins in the United States, with many Jewish Americans and others that continue to see in Zionism a more hopeful aspiration of a peaceful longing to the land, that if in fact that's what you want, if that's what you aspire for, are you ready to, if you will, divest that articulation of Zionism from all of its harmful implications? Because at the end of the day, then we're talking about semantics. What you end up with at that end of that process, and what we're talking about when we're talking about dismantling that version of Zionism, we're really talking about the same thing. And I think we need to come to a way of envisioning that pathway forward together.
So I definitely want to talk about that, but before, I want to address some of the earlier questions about what can we do. I think there are so many tools in the toolkit. There's so many levels of organizing and activism that are already underway. I think for those of us who are connected to institutions, we should demand that those institutions, whether it's our denomination, religious denominations, or our labor unions, or whatever they might be, we should demand that they be transparent about their investments. We should learn about where our money is going, and if they are going to support the occupation and genocide of the Palestinian people, we need to organize and make sure that we do not let go of that demand. I also want to mention, since we're in Evanston, that there has been an attempt to get a ceasefire resolution through City Council for months. And I want to say right here, I am a resident, almost 30-year resident of Evanston. I want to put a challenge out to leaders, to clergy in this city, to ask them, why are they not supporting this? Why is this stalled when cities around the country are passing ceasefire resolutions? Why is Evanston not doing that? For all of you who have religious communities that you belong to, I would ask your Evanstonian religious leaders why they are not supporting it, or why are they actively opposing it. Ceasefire resolutions are not simply symbolic. They have direct impact. Israel pays attention to them, and certainly Palestinians in Gaza pay attention to them. So those are some concrete suggestions. The student encampments, there's a reason they're putting divestment at the center of their demands. We need to demand transparency and accountability and organize around this. The issue of Zionism, you know, it is, I agree with Rami that it is by and large a semantic issue. Zionism, I defined Zionism earlier in my remarks, but I'll say it again. Zionism is an ideology and a movement that seeks to create and maintain a Jewish majority state in historic Palestine. That is what Zionism is. Now, it is true that historically there were other forms of Zionism. Achad Ha'am, for instance, a Eastern European Jewish leader, was a rabbi, rather, a writer, was a so-called cultural Zionist that wasn't necessarily calling for a nation state in Palestine, but was calling for Israel to become a kind of cultural center for Jews around the world. There were Zionists like Judah Magnus, an American rabbi who moved to Israel, Hannah Arendt, Albert Einstein, were part of a movement called Brit Shalom, which was calling for a binational state before the establishment of Israel. This is historically true. There have been many different kinds and necessarily not always statist forms of Zionism. But since the establishment of the State of Israel, all of that is moot. Right? Zionism is embodied by the State of Israel. Zionism seeks to create an ethnic Jewish state in this land. That is what is embodied by Israel. It's embodied by Zionist institutions like the World Zionist Organization and the Jewish Agency and Jewish federations around this country and Jewish institutions around the world. That is the embodiment of Zionism. And it is inherently inequitable because it focuses on maintaining a Jewish demographic majority in a land which has multi-ethnicities and multi-religions. So, you know, someone can say, well, I'm a cultural Zionist, and that's all well and good, but that's a semantic issue. The real question is, what is your vision for the future? And unless your vision does not include every single person who lives between the river and the sea has equal rights, is an equal citizen, has full civil and human rights, then you're just supporting apartheid. You're just supporting settler colonialism. You know, that's really the issue. So I would argue to not be too sidelined by the issue of, well, what kind of Zionism are we talking about? You know, I think, you know, Rami's comparison to the United States is an interesting one. You know, there has been a debate in this country about what America is and what an American is from the earliest years of the history of this country. You know, Frederick Douglass, you know, wrote in his famous speech on the 4th of July, where he was calling into question what, you know, this America that you belong to, that ain't my America. Malcolm talked about this all the time. That has been an ongoing debate almost from the establishment of the United States of America, so-called. Israel was founded to be a Jewish state. It never had a constitution. It has never had a constitution. It has, since its establishment in 2018, passed a nation-state law that says that Israel is the eternal state of the Jewish people and creates second-class citizenship for those who are not Jewish. That's not up for debate in Israel. Anyone who raises that debate, we raise that debate in this country, and it's a healthy debate about the future of this country. And often it's not so healthy, but it's a debate that is vibrant and robust. In Israel, if you suggested equal rights for all, you're calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, and you're an anti-Semite. So it's very, very different. It's, you know, I'm not saying that the United States does not have huge racism problems that go way back to the establishment of this country, because of the, you know, the nature of the ongoing genocide of indigenous peoples and the transatlantic slave trade that built this country. But we're fighting for that identity. In Israel, that fight is not happening. And I think that's a really important difference between our two countries, between those two countries.
Can I maybe just also add something on that? I think it's very clear that the settler colonial project cannot be the vision. That is a nightmare. And by the way, it's not only a nightmare for Palestinians, it's also a nightmare for Jews as well. And I think the earlier we recognize that, the better it is for everyone. And so when we're thinking about the future, I need to come back to what I said about geography and demography. Because I know usually people ask this question meaning two-state or one-state. I don't mind the two-state, I don't mind the one-state, as long as geography is shared, because you can have a one-state where the Israeli have 95% of the land. We are equal, but they own the land, which is now what's happening in South Africa. They dismantled, right, apartheid. Now blacks can vote, but the land, the geography is in the hands of the white. We don't want that. So we have two peoples, we have three religions. We need to share the demography on equal footing. So we cannot give up on equality. We cannot give up on inclusivity. We don't want exclusive ideologies, national or religious, by the way. Jerusalem has to be inclusive. The whole country has to be inclusive, which means everyone feels at home and can develop their cultural and religious and spiritual identities the way they feel it is part of their identity. This is very important for me. And so it's an inclusive, equal country that I have in mind, where we share really the geography and we share neighborhood. Now, regarding the role of religious leaders, I can say a lot about that, but I want to say that a few weeks ago I was in DC and I met these, young pastors and few rabbis, by the way. They were having a service outside of Congress with Holy Communion. And after that, they went into Congress and they had a sit-in and they were all detained. For me, these are religious leaders that stand up to really what they believe in. They are ready to walk the talk. Many of religious leaders, unfortunately, they like to talk. I mean, this is what we are trained to do, preach, but they don't walk the talk. And Rami, interestingly, he quoted Bonhoeffer. People in this country, they love Bonhoeffer, in Germany even more. But nobody would like to do or has the guts to do what Bonhoeffer did by actually challenging with his life. And so I think this is kind of leadership we need today. And I think religious leaders today, they don't belong only in churches, but they belong on the streets. There you can see who are the real religious leaders.
Iva?
I would add that semantics requires of us to think differently in the context of a media and a press that is no longer grounded in an assumption that it's about seeking the truth and reporting the facts. When the press is shifted on an assumption of weaponization to get my agenda over, which is where we are now, then the language does become very, very important and different. And so we may need to create different kinds of languages to express, or constructs to express what we're trying to say. But we have to be very clear. We cannot get in a debate about good Zionism and bad Zionism. Zionism is what it is. And Zionism is built on an assumption of a hierarchy of human value, which says that some people are chosen and therefore have more rights to the goodies of the universe, which comes from the divine. And one of the things I think we really have to figure out how we're going to do is to change the conversation with a new understanding that one of the things is that people like Bezos has more power in some ways than a nation state. So when you even talk about two-state solution or a one-state solution, or who's going to control the natural resources, I mean, we need to understand right now there is no Gaza. So are we talking about a Marshall Plan, and a Marshall Plan in terms of whose land? Whose land is going to be protected? So the question about the connectivity between white supremacy, and I would call it white dominion, because supremacy reinforces the notion of a hierarchy of human value, is based on a theology of dominion, which is based on an assumption that we ought to be able to have these 7 areas of human life controlled by a certain group of people who represent those at the top. Even to the point that 50, 60 years ago, it was forecast, this moment, that democracy was obsolete. B.F. Skinner recanted behavioralism. We need to understand this. One of his last books was called Beyond Freedom and Democracy. And what he said was that democracy in America was going to be obsolete, and we must move to a genetic meritocracy. Quote, genetic, genomic, meritocracy. That is the chosenness. And that has become embedded in the theology of who deserves what. And I'm saying religion is so complicit in this that the question may not be about religious leaders, but it may be about who's human. This is about what it means to be human, not what it means to be a religious person. Because religion has gotten so corrupted.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I am going to offer just a couple more questions. We really only have 5 or 10 minutes left to answer questions. If we did not get to your questions, I apologize for that. I do want you to know that this has been recorded and will be available for viewing. Bright Star's website, and I'm sure that there'll be a link on the Bright Star's Facebook page as well. Okay, so concise as possible. I have a question for Rabbi Rosen. You can start thinking about, do you think it is possible to recognize the state of Israel and yet be an anti-Zionist? Does anti-Zionism mean getting rid of Israel? That's one question. And then I have a question for whoever would like to answer this. What role does Hamas have, both for de-escalation and continued peace in the future of Palestine? The last question I'm going to end on. This year, I can vote in the U.S. elections for the first time.
Mazel tov.
The choice between Biden and Trump is like, and I'm not even going to say what was written, what are we to do? So we're just going to end with that. What are we to do? Okay, so Brant, do you want to start?
Just briefly, I am an anti-Zionist for the reasons that Dr. Carruthers just explained, that Zionism is an ideology of Jewish, to use her term, Jewish dominion. And so Israel cannot continue the way it is. And this needs to be some kind of political structure that allows for full rights for all who live there. And that will not be what is currently Israel. It will be transformed into something else. And that's about the best way I can put that.
Okay. Who'd like to address Hamas?
The father is pointing to the only Muslim on the panel. Let me say this first, though. because time is short, and there's so much to say about all these extraordinary the dynamics related to all of the movements over the last 30, 40, 50 years that have emerged. I think it's, but one thing very practically, we've talking about divestment and talking about the spirit of direct action and what we're doing. We talk about divestment a lot. What we're not talking about, and I think we should be talking about, is also what are we investing in? And I want to make sure that the cause that brought us here together, and I know you'll hear about this in a moment, Bright Stars of Bethlehem, is a vehicle that we should be investing in, because it is absolutely critical amidst all of these dynamics to have the possibility of thriving Palestinian-led institutions across Palestine, the West Bank. In Bethlehem right now is a critical juncture. So this, as I opened up with, is the only university of its kind in the entire area. So I want to again thank you and acknowledge you and this institution, and call on all of you tonight to invest, because I'll say this about Hamas, and what I regret and take personally is that resistance, that the spectrum of resistance that Palestinians have led for decades has included so much beyond the idea of armed resistance, right? BDS is an example of a peaceful, pacifist resistance. Cultural resistance exists every single day. And the arts and cultural expression is absolutely a critical part of how we think about this. Who tells our story? How do we tell our story? And I want to make sure that that is a central part of our work. The conversation about the spectrum of different forms of militant resistance among Palestinians and the right to resist, that is, again, a conversation I don't want to reduce to a 30-second answer. I think when people are asking that question, they are often asking Palestinians, how do they respond to the horror of October 7th? And I will say right here that I can maintain all of the positions I've maintained on this panel and still acknowledge horror. I will never, as a Muslim, never condone in any way, shape, or form. Rape will never be resistance for me. Whether that's one person, whether that's 10, 50, whether it happened on this scale or that scale, I will always condemn that. Whoever prepared, and in the name of whatever movement. There are certain things that, as a principled, ethical understanding of Islam as a source of mercy, that I will always maintain are absolutely antithetical to that. That is not a commentary, though, on the ability to think about there is some level of extraordinary history and complexity to the idea of resistance and the right for Palestinians to resist occupation, to resist the usurpation of their land. I think that is enshrined in Geneva Conventions, it's enshrined in international law, and we would not want to deprive Palestinians with the ability to say, yes, you can resist. The ethics of that resistance, the principles of that resistance, that's in and of itself an entirely different conversation.
I would only say to the person who is about to vote for the first time that you get a sheet of paper and you put a line down the center and you begin to look at the choices that are before you. You don't have but the choices that are before you, and you identify all of those which suggest they assault your humanity based on what you can find out and know about those candidates. And the one who most assaults your humanity is the one you don't want to vote for.
Very quickly, Mitri.
Yeah, very quick. So I will not answer the Hamas question. I'll answer Biden or Trump, okay?
Okay.
I'm an outsider, so. But let me tell the story. I had two friends. One of them was a devout Republican. And he told me when President W. Bush was up for re-election, he told me if he is re-elected, he will free Palestine. I looked at him, I said, let's wait and see. And then I had another friend who was a devout Democrat, and he said only if President Obama will be re-elected, he will give you your freedom. Unfortunately, when it comes to Palestine, this issue is bipartisan. There is no president who was able, maybe there were few who tried, and some of them were Republicans, other Democrats. But I feel right now, it's like with many pastors, nobody has the guts among the leaders, political leaders, to stand up for what is right. There are few on Congress, there are few in Senate that I met recently, and I saw some change. But still, you know, they will not change unless they are forced to. And so they are not the one with the power. I think we need to mobilize people to make sure that our voices are heard. I think often as churches, we don't really know how to mobilize people. I think we have, unlearned that. And for me, we have a lot to do to be able actually to bring really justice to Palestine. And all what we want is for the so-called American values to be implemented in Palestine. I mean, not the American values of segregation, sorry, and settler colonialism with the natives, but I mean, freedom and liberty and pursuit of happiness and so on. This is all what we want in Palestine. So we want the Americanization of Palestine, if you want, but nobody is ready to stand up for the Americanization of Palestine because they want the settler colonial project to continue. But we will keep fighting. We will not give up. We fought all different kinds of empire, and I tell you, our people proved to be resilient. And for me, with this hope, I would like you to go home. Even the most powerful settler colonial project with all the imperial backing will not be able actually to silence our quest and thirst for freedom. Thank you.
And to end this presentation, just a quick word from the Executive Director of Bright Stars of Bethlehem, Chris Doucette.
Hi, friends. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, am I correct in saying that every single person at this table is a world changer? Let's give them another hand. They're all world changers, and 2 of them are Palestinian. I'd like to ask everyone in the audience to stand up if you are Palestinian, please. I want to say to you, friends, that we grieve with you, we stand in solidarity with you, and we love you. Please know that. I am a proud mama of 4 adult children between the ages of 18 and 30. Hannah, Summer, Danny, and Halela. And each one of them have their own gifts, and all of them are musical, they have dreams. And my 4 adult children are the next generation of leaders here in the United States. Raise your hand if you love somebody between the ages of 18 and 30. I think we all do, right? Okay, that is the very age of our students at Dar al-Kalima University. Our mission at Bright Stars of Bethlehem is to raise awareness and support for Dar al-Kalima. And our vision is that, our mission is to raise awareness and support for Dar al-Kalima University, the first and only university of arts and culture in all of Palestine. Now, we say all of Palestine because up until Holy Week, we had a thriving center, an arts center, a satellite center in Gaza. And at that center, we had 120 students between the ages probably of 18 and 30, and they were doing great things. In the last several months, 4 of our precious volunteers were killed in airstrikes. I want to tell you a couple stories. One is about a friend named Muhammad. Muhammad was a 24-year-old, and he was volunteering prior to prior to October 7th. He was volunteering, and he would work with the little ones. And you know, my background is in trauma-informed education, and I know the power of arts therapy and of anything to do with being trauma-informed. And in Gaza, even prior to October 7th, all of the children and all of the adults were traumatized. So our program there, at our satellite program, we had this these wonderful programs where they'd work with the little ones with art. And Muhammad was dedicated to that. And he decided, after October 7th, he decided to, one day he had some time, so he thought, I'm going to go over and I'm going to volunteer with these little ones that are sheltering at a hospital. And he was there, and we have a video of him dancing and singing with the kids, and the dancing and the singing and the hand movements were all to try to calm their nervous systems because they were afraid, they were terrified, right? Well, the very next morning, Muhammad and all 30 of those precious children were murdered in an airstrike. But you know what? There is hope despite genocide. And I want to tell you, with our center in Gaza, even though it doesn't physically exist anymore, there's no building there, the center, the spirit of the center, the hope still exists. And at Bright Stars of Bethlehem, our motto, as coined by Mitri, is hope is what we do. So our resilient Palestinian friends in Gaza, even though there's no center, and our center director named Rana has recently escaped to Egypt with her 2 children, she's still directing that center from Egypt. And as Mitri showed, they're coloring rocks out of the rubble. I saw a picture recently when I was doing an interview, when I was interviewing Rana, and the picture was of these children. Jim, I think it's a few slides past, of these children with face painting. And when I looked at this picture, I had to ask my panelists, or Rana, I'm like, Rana, was that picture taken before October 7th? And she said, no, that was taken a couple weeks ago. So that is hope, despite genocide, right? Hope is what we do. So our center right now no longer exists, but we still have hope. We've got these projects going on. I also want to tell you that Mitri just announced that the Palestinian Authority has selected different universities in Palestine to receive applications from Gazan young people between the ages probably of 18 and 30 to continue their education virtually. Dar al-Kalima is one of the schools that's going to be teaching these kids, and we've already got 2,000 applications, right? That is hope. That is doing hope. Now, we do still have some pretty big challenges, but we also have opportunities. So at our main campus in Bethlehem, we have 500 students. It's gone down a little bit because of some of the challenges. One thing that has happened is because of there have been 165,000 permits that the Israelis have canceled for our students. A lot of our students' parents used to work in Jerusalem, right? So now these permits have been canceled, so a lot of their parents are unemployed. The unemployment rate is sky high. We have one student named Lucy. Jim, I think her picture's there. There she is. She's an example of many of our students are struggling with the inability to pay their tuition because Lucy's dad was one of those permit holders, so he's unemployed. But her mom also is unemployed because she used to sell souvenirs. And what do you think happened with the tourism, right? There's no tourism. And 70% of the economy in Bethlehem is tourism. So we do have a challenge. We have a gap in our tuition, which is about $800,000. We used to, Bright Stars, we augment the tuition. The parents used to have to pay $1,500. But it's okay, because again, hope is what we do, right? And, you know, I'm not a Palestinian, and many of you aren't Palestinian, but I deeply believe in Palestinian flourishing, and I deeply believe in human flourishing. Raise your hand if you believe in human flourishing. Okay. So we have needs at Bright Stars of Bethlehem. Our sole existence is to lift up this incredible world-changing work of Reverend Dr. Mitri Raheb. What we're trying to do is to empower the next generation of creative leaders in Palestine. And there are some, I'm excited to tell you, a lot of times fundraisers feel bad. Like, I don't want to ask anybody for money. Well, I guess that's not a good fundraiser who feels bad about that. But I don't feel bad at all about asking you to come and partner with us, because you know what? Here in the U.S., we don't have a lot of control in some ways about how where our tax dollars go. For example, the $38 billion last year that went to Israel mostly for weapons, right? But how about the fact that we have control over our philanthropy? That's one thing we have control over. We have control over investing. Like Rami was saying, we can invest in the next generation of creative leaders in Palestine. So I ask you, from one believer in human flourishing to another, please partner with us. And for those of you that have already partnered with us, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, because you are a world changer as well. And if you'd like to partner with us, there's so many ways you can do that. We do need funds. So you could, actually there's envelopes on the pews right now, or you can use the QR code. Also, we have a wonderful group of ambassadors here in the Chicagoland area. So if you'd like to learn how to become an ambassador, ambassadors just help us to spread the word and to raise funds and that sort of thing. But again, I want to leave you with this. Think about those 18 to 30-year-olds that you care about. And think about our friends like Wissam and Jude and Rami, all of my friends that I have met there. I wish you could meet them in person. They're so precious, just like our kids. So please do partner with us, and we appreciate each one of you. Thank you.
I want to thank you all today for coming, for being part of this, being called to action and hope. And this concludes our panel presentation today. There are books of Mitri's in the back that you do have available to purchase if you're interested. I wish you safe travels on your way home. Peace be with you. Shalom. Salam. Thank you.